Pixar, it didn't happen. This is the house right here. So Dylan, DM, is here, and the next one I believe is Bethany, I believe. So that's the B, right? So this is DM. This is the one that heard the things. DM stated she opened the door for a third time
3 times
after she heard the crying. And here you go. So she open, close, third time. There's a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, RIP, definitely not a Chad, but athletically built and with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in frozen shock phase, which I do believe if you see something surprising, you can be frozen.
But if she described it that she was frozen in shock, then she knew damn well something was very, very wrong.
Yes.
And
the male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe the murderer left the scene. So she sees all of this.
She doesn't
all
call.
Of this. She
the
does
police
not call
were
the
not
police.
called until 8 hours later.
She was awoken approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Goncalves was playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which were located on the 3rd floor. A short time later, Dylan said she heard who she thought was Goncalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." This sounds like Murder on the Orient Express. It's like DF is like Poirot in his like sleeping chamber there, and just hearing all these noises and peeking out into the hall and seeing the back of a woman wearing like a dragon robe, and then hearing like from another room, "Ah!" and then closes his door and goes back to brushing his teeth. Hears like a dog barking. Am I crazy for saying this is like, this is exactly a Murder on the Orient Express? What's going on here? I'm just trying to go to bed and I hear like all these unusual noises. And in the morning, it was murder. It's crazy. It's really like a movie. A short time later, DM said she heard what she thought was Goncalves say something effect there's someone here. A view records obtained from forensic download of Kernodle's phone showed this could have been Kernodle. As her cell phone indicated, she was likely awake and using TikTok app at approximately 4:12 a.m. Dylan stated she looked out of her bedroom, but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. Dylan said she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. DM then said that she heard a male voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." See, when Emily Baker read this, she reads it in one voice, which is very different from what Dylan probably heard. Like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." But it probably, for the fact that she seemed to be unalarmed, so I'm saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up a distorted audio what sounded like voices of a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. Security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. DM stated she opened the door for a third time after she heard crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking toward her. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM. This is like, it's like an ice cold rating from Dylan here. The male walked past Dylan as she stood in a frozen shock phase. So people who are trying to say that maybe she didn't know that anything was wrong, I'm sorry. This wording here, she stood in a frozen shock phase, is meant to imply that she knew that this guy was committing monstrous acts. There's no other way to read this affidavit as anything but trying to convey that Dylan was freaked out when she saw this guy. And not that she was like, oh, it's another boyfriend, or oh, isn't he so dorky looking? Why is Xana going out with this loser? But that she was like, no, this guy is the devil. This guy is evil. This guy might end her life. A frozen shock face. A frozen shock face is meant to convey that she recognized the face of evil when she saw it, or the eyes of evil when she saw it. She knew this was a bad guy. And not that she went to sleep thinking everyone is fine. So I think all these theories that people are throwing out there, saying like, maybe she didn't realize, she didn't know, it's a party house, people are coming and going. This line right here, a male walked past Diem as she stood in a, quote, frozen shock phase, is meant to imply that Dylan knew that this guy was some crazed psychopath.
Diem says she looked out of her room, did not see anything when she heard someone being in the house. Diem stated she opened the door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying from the room. And then she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." That doesn't sound very good to me. Somebody didn't really help too much. At 417, the security cameras there, just to the north, picked up what sounded like a loud thud and a whimper. And the dog's barking his head off at 417. And it's less than 50 feet from the wall of one of the bedrooms where the girl and her boyfriend were killed. She stated that she opened the door a third time, heard the crying, and saw a figure in black-clad clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She claims the guy was about 5'10" or taller, and a male, not very muscular. Okay, it sounds like Brian Kohberger. Kind of tall and lanky, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Okay, he's bushy eyebrow and looks like he's kind of a runner. She says the male walked past him, and then she stood frozen in shock. And that the guy kept on walking out the door, and she locked herself in a room after seeing the male. And she said she didn't recognize him. And that's when they determined around 417 or so, or around that time, the murderer left the scene.
Then they have the roommate who is providing a description of somebody that they describe basically in the house. This is page 4 of the affidavit. So if you're reading along at home, it says Diem stated she opened her door for the third time after she heard crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. Diem described the figure as 5'10" or taller. We know that Kernodle's driver license said he was 6 feet. Not very muscular, but athletically built and bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Diem as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the backsliding glass door. Diem locked herself in the room after seeing the male. Diem stated that she did not recognize the male, and investigators believe that the murderer left the scene. That's when the murderer left the scene. Which is, I'm not going to say, why did she not call the police immediately? I mean, she probably didn't know what the hell was going on. Who knows? But it is what it is.
A short time later, Diem said she heard what she thought was G saying something to the effect of, "There's someone here." A review of the records obtained from forensic download of Kernodle's phone showed that this could have been Kernodle, as her cellular phone indicated she was likely awake and using the TikTok app at 4:12 a.m. Phones are going to be a big part of this case because it's going to give them a timeline, a helpful timeline, because they're going to know what they were doing. But also, can relate. Just can. Diem stated that she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being at the house. And again, I don't know if this comment would seem odd given you've got 4 roommates. They've been out, they've been having a night out. Someone coming home with someone doesn't seem too alarming at this point. Let's keep going. DM stated she looked at her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. DM stated she opened the door for a second time and she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernoodle's room. DM then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." That's chilling. Emily, just keep reading. Emily, just keep reading. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. Those doorbell cameras. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times, starting at 4:17 a.m. So between 4:12 a.m., this is just my brain thinking. So at 4:12 a.m., Kernoodle's on TikTok. Sometime right after that, they heard what might have been crying coming from Kernoodle's room and someone saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," which is chilling. And then at 4:17, we've got external evidence of distorted audio, a whimper followed by a thud, and then a dog barking at 4:17. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernoodle's bedroom. That's awful. So like the human side of me is like, that's awful. And the DA side of me is like, that's evidence. That's evidence that they are going to use that is going to chill a jury. Hearing audio evidence is so visceral. And we saw that in the Darrell Brooks case, particularly when they were playing through the audio of just the audio only of the music playing in the band in the car. It's so visceral. So from like the prosecution standpoint, that is collected preserved evidence that is going to be strong evidence of what happened there. We're not tying a person to the thing. We're at a timeline of what happened. We will tie a person to a thing later in this affidavit, I am sure. But we are at tying together what happened. And this is going to tie together a timeline of what happened. And then what you're going to want to do as a prosecutor in front of a jury is take the timeline of what happened at the house and the timeline of where you know the defendant to be or not to be, and match those together. So this is going to be powerful evidence for a jury and difficult evidence for a jury to listen to because they know what that is, or they are going to be able to tie together what they think that is. Yes, I know I need to keep reading. There is more. DM stated she opened her door, and for those of you in the chat, a lot of you are asking who's DM'd. DM is one of the surviving roommates. We talked about DM and BF earlier up. DM stated she opened the door for a third time and she heard crying and saw a figure clad in... DM stated she opened the door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking toward her. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Athletically built generally means not carrying some extra. I would not be described as athletically built, but that when we see the police transcribe into athletically built, it's like, they're just, fit, I guess. So 5'10" or taller, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Given a black clothing and mask that covered the nose and mouth, the eyes tend to stand out very much. I had a witness in a court case come into court and look to identify the defendant, and you could see the recognition in their face. And this was a defendant who had a nose and mouth covered and was like, I will never forget those eyes because they haunt me. So I'm not surprised we have so much detail about bushy eyebrows and eyes. I imagine that the person who experienced this, DM, if they have watched any of this coverage, will have a visceral response to seeing this defendant being arrested and detained if they recognize this individual, and that will be a very visceral response if they have to identify this person in court, because this will be a witness, if this goes to trial, that will be sitting in court and will be looking at that person and identifying them in court, which will be difficult. Let's see. So the male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock face. I can imagine. The male walked towards the backsliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So they are believing that DM saw the defendant leaving and then locked herself in her room. I can already see people saying, why questioning what DM's actions were. We're not through this affidavit yet. One never knows how one is going to respond in a circumstance. And so I'm not going to speculate about that. You never know how you are going to respond in a circumstance. And the information that they had was that something was off and then they saw that person. But they froze. I'm not surprised that they froze. Freezing happens. So just be gracious. This person has been through it.
DM stated she opened her door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. Chilling, wild, scary. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows, which I think is an important detail because he's wearing a mask so she can see the bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the black sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. She did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So let's take a timeout right here real quick, because this is the second very important and new piece of evidence that came here. Thank you, Sydney, and everybody else throwing these super chats at. We're going to get to a lot of questions here in a bit. So I have a lot of questions about this part. The first question is, this happened at 4:17-ish a.m., right? That's the last timestamp we have up here before we get to the third time she opened the door. So let me just explain to you one way to explain how this happened. She hears someone say, she hears movement up there with Gonsalves thinking she's playing with her dog. She hears Gonsalves say, there's somebody in here. She hears some crying. We hear on the camera, which it's weird that DM does not corroborate what we heard on the camera, a loud thud after some whimpering. We didn't hear DM state that there was a loud thud, but let's assume there's a loud thud. She then opens the door again, sees a 5'10" or taller male dressed in all black with a mask on, walk downstairs, and she is frozen in shock, which I can totally understand. And then she locks herself in the room and he leaves. When you say it like that, that sounds like a series of events that she could testify to that will be very damning for Bryan Kohberger, because he is 6 foot, 185 pounds. I wouldn't say he's overly muscular, but he is, athletic build. And I would say he has bushy eyebrows, or at least somebody could explain them to be bushy eyebrows. I assume maybe she picked him out of a lineup even. So he fits that description. And anybody obviously could be wearing black with a black mask. Now here's the issue. 5'10", athletically built males is probably as average as you can get. That's me. I think that's about JB. We were talking about this on his show. I think a lot of males are 5'10" or taller even, as Kohberger is actually taller than 5'10". So when that description at first may sound just like Kohberger, it can sound like a lot of people. That's number one. Number two, you hear all this stuff. You see this person walk out. I assume you could hear him walk out the sliding glass door. You don't go upstairs to check on your roommate. I can understand that. Maybe she's scared. Maybe she's scared that he's still there. Maybe she's scared that he's going out and going to come back in. So that, I think there's an easy answer for why she didn't do that. But then the biggest question out of everything from when I'm reading this probable cause affidavit that I think is problematic, or that a defense attorney is absolutely going to dig into, is why wait from 4 a.m. to noon to call 911 to report this, to go check on your roommate? I don't think that there's a good answer. I'm not condemning her. She's a young girl at college, doesn't understand maybe the consequences or something that could have happened, or, maybe she had been out drinking or whatever it may be. But to me, this is going to be a very touchy spot to get through for the prosecution. Because here are some of the questions. Okay, that I would ask her if I was a criminal defense lawyer. And please don't take this as insensitive. I think this is why you guys watch, to think about how these cases can play out, how lawyers look at them. And the truth is, they need to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. We need to be sure this is the right person. We need to be sure the evidence is authentic, admissible, and credible. We have to make sure the evidence is credible. And I think that there may be a credibility issue here. So here are some of the questions that could be asked of DM. So number one, why not call the cops immediately from your locked bedroom where you at least felt safe enough to stay? And maybe she'll say something like, I was drunk and I was scared because I'm underage, or I smoked some weed or did some drugs. I didn't want to get arrested or in trouble if I called the cops. So those questions are legitimate excuses, right? Those are legitimate excuses. But if that is her answer, then I think the follow-up question would be, so you were drunk, so you were high, so potentially you might not have seen what you thought you saw. Your memory may be foggy. Maybe you didn't see things crystal clear. It was 4 a.m. What were you doing for the previous, 7 hours? Okay. I think those will be questions to the credibility and how, legitimate some of what she thought she heard, especially something to the effect of someone's here, something to the effect of, I'm going to help you, don't worry. So, I think that creates a credibility issue if that's her answer. But then, so Tom N said this, and I asked JB and a couple reporters on WFLA because I don't know this answer. Tom N said, I heard the 911 call information was false data and the call was made right then. I hope that is the case because that would eliminate a lot of these credibility issues that I'm thinking of. But if it was noon, I do think that one of her answers may just be, and I think the defense attorney can again have a field day with this. If she just says, and it may be the truth, right? If she just says, it wasn't all that uncommon for a college-age dude to be in our house, to be leaving our house at 4 a.m., to be hanging out in our house late, after party, watching a movie. Maybe it was a new boyfriend of one of the roommates that she hadn't met yet. Something you talk about maybe in the morning with your friends, in college, and not like stop at 4 a.m. and go upstairs after he's leaving and be like, hey, what's going on with that? And I think if you say that, then the defense attorney may be like, then it wasn't anything that was scary, right? So even if it was Bryan Kohberger that you saw, you didn't see any blood on him. You didn't see any blood on his face or blood on his clothes, or he wasn't carrying a knife, right? She didn't say he was carrying a knife or anything like that. So maybe it was just some guy, and even if it was Bryan Kohberger, maybe it was just some guy hanging out with the girls. I think that that's another argument they could make is she didn't call 911 if she didn't, right? Which is what all the reporting is. She didn't call 911. She didn't go upstairs to see Gonsalves because she wasn't scared, and it was normal for people to be around the house at all hours of the night. Star Sorcerer, yet she was frozen. Why? And that's where I think the credibility, where she can't say, well, there was, wasn't that weird because there was always, people, even college age guys coming in and out of the house at late hours, whatever. Like, she can't say that because she said now in this statement that she was frozen with fear. So then it begs the next question. If you're frozen with fear, why would you not, when you locked yourself in the room for safety, I assume, call 911 immediately? Maybe her phone wasn't in the room. Maybe it was dead, whatever it may be. But questions stack up regardless of what her answer is. Paley, is it possible they only released a portion of her statement in this affidavit? I guess it's possible. Yeah, because this is kind of like a summary of what she said. We don't see her entire statement. Chances are there is a police report with her entire statement, maybe even recorded.
The probable cause affidavit tells us that DM originally went to sleep in her bedroom. She is in the southeast side of the second floor. She was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Gonsalves and Mogen had bedrooms up on the third floor. A short time later, she said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Based on their review, police think it's possible that it may have been Kernodle that she heard and not Gonsalves. DM said she looked out of her bedroom but didn't see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. A second time, she opened the door because she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. And she then heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She then opened her door for the third time after she heard this crying, and she saw a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So, pretty harrowing thing for a young girl. I believe she was a freshman at University of Idaho at this time to have to go through. And just given the circumstances of how all of this unfolded, we have a lot of reason to think that this was an extremely shocking, very traumatic event for her. I know that there has been a lot of tendency on social media to speculate about why she didn't immediately call the police, why it, was not until 11 a.m. the following morning that the 911 call was made. To me, this is not particularly surprising for a number of reasons. I don't really intend to get into a lot of that here, but suffice it to say, yes, the defense is going to be asking about that, but I don't think this is going to be something that there will really be a big opportunity to make a lot of hay out of, because there are plenty of reasonable explanations for why a person experiencing an extremely stressful event like this would respond in the way that she did. So the important thing that the police got from DM in this interview was the physical description of the man in the home. And this was key. This was the linchpin, in my view, to breaking this case open. So let's take a look at why that is. So from a legal standpoint, the reason why this was so critically important is because police can't just go on a fishing expedition willy-nilly, get search warrants for anything and everything to try to hunt for evidence of a crime. The Fourth Amendment requires probable cause to issue a search warrant. And the reason for that is because we have expectations of privacy. We're not the kind of country where, the police is supposed to be able to broadly surveil you, keep an eye on you for conduct that they decide that they want to punish. So the probable cause standard is what her information supplied to them. Probable cause generally means there's a good reason to believe that we're going to find evidence of a crime in this particular place. And that suspicion has to be particularized. It has to be individualized. It can't just be a general suspicion. Everybody with a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra in, the Pacific Northwest within driving distance of University of Idaho, something like that. It's far too broad, and that would be way too wide of a net to cast here, given that everybody else who didn't commit this crime they have privacy interests in the information, particularly that's in their cell phones. There's just, you know, a lot of data that you can find out about a person by looking at their phone or plugging it into an extraction device. So it has to be individualized, and that's the key piece here of what that description gave them. They gave a reason to sort out this particular suspect from all of the other vehicles that they were potentially looking at, and combined with the other circumstances that they were able to show, the path of travel, the fact that they had located the vehicle that came and went from WSU in the general time frames of the murders, the night of the murders, those things gave them that particularized suspicion that they needed to be able to say, look, taking all of these circumstances into account, there's a pretty good chance that this is who we're looking for. It's not a guarantee. It's not even a probability, but it's just a pretty good suspicion that if you go looking, you're going to find something. So that's what got them the warrant to be able to get the cell site location information. That's what enabled them to then pin that phone to that car and to be able to identify the other movements around the time frame of the murders, and of course in the days leading up and potentially after as well. So without Diem's identification, there is no reasonable suspicion here. There is nobody in particular to target. And without that, there's no search warrant. Without the search warrant for the CSLI, there's no case. We don't know who we're targeting. Now, it's possible that police are gonna come across a suspect at some point, but it's also very possible that he might kill again before they have the evidence that they need to be able to put all of the pieces together. And so I don't think it's too much to say that while Mr. Kohberger is 100% entitled to his presumption of innocence, and while we have just a very small part of the picture at this point in time, there is a lot of this case still to come. If he is the person who did it, her identification may have saved a lot of lives. They may have saved people from having to go through the type of horror that I have to anticipate that she is probably going through at this point in time. So I thought it was really important to say this because I think it's a virtual certainty that having experienced this, she is dealing with a lot of trauma. She is very likely dealing with survivor's guilt. She is very likely dealing with self-doubt, questioning just what could she have done differently types of questions. She's going to be reliving this night, unfortunately, probably for the rest of her life. And so I think it's really important to be able to, whenever we can, and even in the darkest circumstances like this, to be able to look at the silver lining in all of this horror. And the silver lining is that everything that she has had to go through, everything that she is going to suffer, that may have saved people. And it certainly is the reason why we have a criminal charge, a criminal process that's been initiated in the court that can now play itself out. So for that reason, Diem is a hero in my eyes, and I really hope that you will join me in seeing her and treating her in that fashion.
The Idaho murder victim's surviving female roommate likely didn't call for help after coming face to face with accused killer Bryan Kohberger because she may have been paralyzed by fear and confusion, experts told Fox News Digital. The roommate, one of two who survived the attack, faced swift backlash after it was revealed in an affidavit Thursday that she awoke November 13th and looked directly at the alleged murderer as he fled, then locked herself in her bedroom. Yeah, okay. So when a person goes through trauma, they're going to experience flight, fight, or freeze, said Dr. Catherine Coleman, a police and public safety psychologist based in Arizona. Most people in their entire lives won't have to deal with this type of trauma and won't mentally prepare for it. The roommate, whose name Fox Digital is withholding, encountered Kohberger shortly before 4:20 a.m. after he allegedly slaughtered Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. After hearing crying coming from Kernodle's room, the roommate opened her bedroom door, which is on the same floor. The roommate saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. The male walked past the roommate as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The man she described as having bushy eyebrows walked by her and exited the second floor sliding glass door, as she told police. And again, before that, at 4 a.m., she was awakened by what she thought was Gonzalez playing with her dog. Then she heard her say, "There's someone here," according to the affidavit. Oh, there's so many questions. After the intruder took off, nearly 8 hours passed before a call was placed to 911. On one of the surviving roommate's cell phone reporting an unconscious person, police have not disclosed who placed that call. Coleman, who primarily works with special responders who've been through mass casualty incidents, say a young woman likely wouldn't pick up on the glaring cues that indicate a crisis situation. Trauma becomes more difficult to process when it's something that is so far outside of our consciousness, it doesn't seem to make sense to us, she said. In this case, no one ever thinks they're going to have this man come into their home and brutally stab their roommates. The other surviving female roommate slept through the attack. Alan Zabel, 50, who owns a yoga studio in Santa Monica, California, knows this phenomenon all too well. In 1992, she lived in a 3-story home with 5 Chi Omega sorority sisters at the University of Buffalo. Zabel found her college roommate near death at 9 a.m. September 5th after the young woman had been brutally beaten and raped by an intruder. "I didn't see any blood," Zabel said. "I thought she had choked on her vomit, and I called 911 and said my roommate choked on her vomit. Only when paramedics arrived did she register for the first time that the entire room was covered in blood." This is an actual thing. And I mean, that's one thing that I've been talking about since this thing first happened, was how do you wake up and just say, "Oh, the roommate's asleep," and they're not waking up? You can literally block out the things that are so far outside the realm of your concept or expectations of what's happening that you literally don't process this.